If you play guitar and love pedals, you may have strong feelings about compressors. You might swear by them, or you might feel like they totally squash your guitar's natural tone. Or you just may not understand them at all. But compression is a whole different world in the studio. It's a part of basically every recording ever made, sort of smoothing tracks out and giving them that final bit of punch, or even just like sort of gluing them together in the mix. And few studio compressors are as legendary as the Array or the Universal Audio 1176 peak limiter. The original 1176 peak limiter, then made by Array, came from the mind of Bill Putnam back in 1967. If you don't recognize the name, the guy is sort of like the Leo Fender of recording gear. He's responsible for studio classics like the LA2A compressor and the LA610 channel strip. And I'm sure you've heard of the company Universal Audio. Those are the guys behind the Apollo interfaces, the aux box, and of course a ton of great plugins. The 1176 was quite unique when it came out in the 60s though. Back then, nearly all studio equipment still relied on tubes, but the 1176 was one of the first compressors to use FETs, sort of like this, to create the compression effect. Now the FETs gave it a super fast attack, but guitarists and producers quickly realized that it was really fantastic at just giving a guitar tone, or even layers of guitar tone, just more life. And no matter how you ran it, it just made everything sound bigger and fuller and punchier. It just sounded so good. In fact, engineers would even run stuff through it without any compression just to get the tonality of the circuit, to sort of flavor the sound in the way that only the 1176 did. And the 1176 has another side to its personality as well. By engaging all the units' ratio buttons at the same time, often called the British mode, you get a tight, sort of smashed compression that's heard on loads of classic rock records. It's almost too much compression on its own, but run it in parallel and that's really where the fun begins. So how does all this relate to guitar pedals? Well, let me tell you. There are countless compressor pedals out there, each great at its own thing. There are also plenty of 1176 style pedals, but none of them have really ever quite done it for me. They all sound great on their own, don't get me wrong. But really nothing gave me the sound of like that entire signal chain. See, the problem is that if you just take the schematics of the 1176 and you repurpose it like you would any other compressor pedal, or if you take it out of the analog realm and make a digital version of it, like others have done, it kind of creates a problem. If you do that, you're basically just trying to recreate something that was never designed for you to plug a guitar into. So it's kind of leaving critical parts of the chain out. Generally, these compressors were used after the mic signal hits the mixing desk. On top of that, whenever the 1176 was used on electric guitars, it was very often used via parallel compression. So let me explain a bit. Parallel compression is a mixing technique where you blend your compressed signal with an uncompressed or unaffected signal. And part of the sound that we know and love is often a result of this blending at the mixing desk, not really from the FET circuit itself, from the FET circuit going into the amp itself. So the more I thought about this, the more I decided that, well, if I'm going to design an 1176 inspired compressor pedal, then it has to respond like the rack unit, and it has to capture the subtle and the wild parts of its personality. But it also has to have enough control to dial in those sounds without giving guitarists option paralysis and without requiring dragging a mixing board and mic preamps and a mess of cables, just to connect it all. But most importantly, it must incorporate parallel compression to bring out the sound that we guitar players love about the 1176 style of compression. It's a big thing to accomplish from a little 9-volt pedal, but for the past 18 months or so, I've been absolutely obsessed on getting it just right. And here you go. The Ego 76 is my attempt to get the full 1176 thing. Controls, sound, feel, all while optimizing it for guitarists and their rigs. The pedal keeps true to the FET heart of the original, which is the key to the feel of this type of compression circuit. I did not, however, just copy the 1176 schematic and add a few tweaks to it and call it a day. Not at all. I spent a huge amount of time just getting all the preamp portion of the circuit flavor just right, and after all, I am trying to get the sound of not only the compression, but the entire signal chain, as I mentioned earlier. I also made sure that the controls had plenty of range in them to help dial in tones. All the sweet spots, no dead spots. And if I'm being honest, I did go a bit selfish here. I sort of built this for myself and my friends, those who have asked me about how to get that 1176 sound without spending a ton of cash. So with that said, I think you really love it as well. So let's take a closer look at this thing. First, we have to mention the blend control. That's your parallel compression. All the way clockwise is full compression, no clean blend. All the way counterclockwise, completely clean, no compression. Blending your clean signal back in reintroduces more of your attack and natural dynamics. In my opinion, you really can't get the full 1176 experience without a clean blend. We also have an attack knob. Counterclockwise is quickest attack. Clockwise is slowest attack. Release is similar. Counterclockwise is quickest release. Clockwise is slowest release. Note, though, that this is backwards from the actual original 1176. And why is that? Well, because as a guitar player, this just made more sense to me personally. Quick release, quick attack, all the way counterclockwise. The tone control is an active control, so middle is neutral, counterclockwise is darker, and clockwise is brighter. I do realize the original 1176 doesn't have this, but it does have a mixing board attached to it. Kinda. Ultimately, having a tone control to dial in everything is just really handy. The compress knob is interesting. There's a ton of compression available. That's because I wanted to make sure there was an all buttons in mode, just like you'd use the ratio buttons on an actual 1176 studio compressor. So for this mode, turn the compress knob all the way up. If you're using it in front of your guitar amp with very little blend, I'm gonna bet you keep it right around noon or so, maybe a little bit more, as that's plenty of compression for most anyone. But you really need the all buttons in mode to do some great tricks with it. The way I personally run it is a bit different than what you might think, though. Keep in mind, I'm going after studio compression here, so really not typical Ross or Dynacomp type squash. But because even though 1176 has been used in the studio for years, this is really kind of more of a modern style of compression that makes your favorite song sound massive. So what I do is I add it to my effects loop, and I just ride the blend control so it makes the tone just really more lively and more expressive. Honestly, there's no one way to recreate a studio compressor in a guitar pedal. And really, there are so many classic pedals out there just doing their thing. Obviously, I'm still a fan of the standard Wampler Ego, but still, there's something special about the sound and the feel of playing through those old analog studio compressors. And that's the feeling that I want you to experience every time you kick on the Ego 76. And just like the 1176, there are a lot of different ways to use it. So subtle studio glue, it's there. Want just a FET peak limiter so everything on your board is at the same level? Yeah, not a problem. Or you can just go nuts dialing in the full-blown British mode squash. But just be sure to give the parallel clean blend a twist to kind of bring out the magic. The Ego 76 isn't just another 1176 clone for your pedal board, though. It's a FET compressor that takes everything into account in order to sound and respond like a rack version in a recording signal chain. So if that magical, musical 1176 Studio Mojo is what you're after, you should probably check it out. So thanks for watching. You can go to our website and order right now, or you can check out your favorite retailer and buy it from them as well. So catch you later with another video.